Hello and good day, and welcome to Fintech Podcast, the podcast that explores finances and, of course, technology. My name is Mazino Appeal, and today we have a very interesting topic as we're going to be discussing cross-border transactions. Well, I won't be doing that alone because I'm not the expert. Of course, we have an expert. Of course, you know where from. First Bank, of course. Today we have with us discussing this very important conversation. Inside of this important conversation, Mr. Ebong. He was appointed Deputy Managing Director in June 2024 of First Bank, and prior to that, he was the Executive Director, Treasurer, and also International Banking. He's been in international banking since January of 2022. But let the man himself tell us more about him. You're welcome, Mr. Ini. Good to have you here with us.
Thank you very much, Mazino, and I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you indeed. First off, let's talk about how you got here, since we're on that topic. Could you talk us through your times at First Bank and how you actually graduated to be where you are at the moment?
Yeah, sure. Well, I actually started my banking career in Citibank way back in the 90s. And I spent a fair bit of time there covering quite a lot of things, finance, operations. Eventually, I found myself in Treasury, where I spent quite a bit of time. So I left Citibank after spending about 14 years there, and I joined a Russian investment bank, whom at the time, in 2007, when African financial markets were opening up, had a very ambitious Pan-African agenda, which I found very, very exciting. So I joined them and I was crisscrossing Africa, looking at debt and equity capital markets. And then in 2011, First Bank came calling. And I joined First Bank initially to look after the treasury business. And then as time went on, they added things to what I was doing, financial institutions. And then ultimately, I had responsibility for the international banking business, which was all the subsidiaries across Africa. So once again, I started crisscrossing Africa, running after various countries, the banks that we own in the various countries we operated in. And then ultimately, in June, I was appointed the DMD.
After 30 years, I mean, all of that experience actually came through. Plus that you had to go across Africa with the different branches. And that leads us to our topic today, cross-border transactions. From where I understand it is the interactions, financial interactions between or from inside of different countries. This affects individuals, affects businesses, affects governance itself. But first off, give us like a cursory overview of what exactly it entails for those who might not exactly know what it means.
Cross-border transactions basically are transacting across countries. So I'm in country A, you are in country B. Either at the individual level, I want to send money from one country to somebody in another country. That's a cross-border transaction at a very basic level. Or it could be related to international trade. I want to import goods from a supplier in another country, right? So the processes around that enable the finances or funding to flow from one point to another is essentially what underpins cross-border transactions. And then there's a whole overlay of regulation that you must contend with, technology that makes it happen. Because it's easy for us to walk into a bank or go into your app and you click a button and some amount of money moves from your account.
We don't know what's in the background.
Also, exactly. There's a whole myriad of things that go on in the background. That essentially is what cross-border transactions are.
In an earlier conversation, we talked about APIs and how they actually are also a tool when it comes to cross-border transaction as well. But however, cross-border transactions have been plagued by so many, well, especially insecurity. There's insecurity, there's whether people would embrace them or they're trepid to do so. They'd rather cross the border with their amounts. How has innovation played in this space to encourage people to actually start to interact with these kinds of transactions?
That's a very good question. I think you have to look at it in two ways. First, at the individual level, and then at the corporate level. As an individual, essentially what you want is basically to transfer money from me to another person. Could be a family member, could be your child, could be, so someone relative asking for some support or whatever.
Daily 2K.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, at the individual level, what are your biggest concerns? Security. that when I walk into the bank or I use whatever app or, platform that the money gets there, then your concerns are costs, security. From the provider side, his concerns are more around who are you? So it's a question around one, who are you? That is, can I identify who is transferring this money? What is this money being transferred for? And then secondary, is it legitimate? Right? We hope this is not fraudulent, right? So those are the two concerns when it comes out at an individual level. So clearly for the provider, and bear in mind, because of anti-money laundering, what we call AML, KYC, know your customer, and then the global push to combat illicit flows of money associated with terrorism, illegal trafficking, drugs, and so on and so forth, right? There are a whole bunch of regulations and controls around that. So for the provider who's providing that service, whether it's at the platform level, whether it's at the bank level, those are their concerns. And hence, they have to have extended levels of diligence around that to ensure that when you walk in as an individual or sign on to their platform, you pass those tests, and then they can execute on your behalf seamlessly, right? Their guarantee or their obligation to you is to then do so in a secure, efficient manner, right? Now, at the corporate level, or when it's a business level, it's slightly different. Yes, we still have all those overlays in there, but then at the business level, you are transacting over the border, or in a cross-border manner to facilitate cross-border trade. So then you enter the realm of complying with trade regulation, right? Because each country will have its own regulations as it relates to imports and exports of goods, necessary to protect domestic industry and all of that. So at the corporate level, not only do you have to deal with the AML, KYC, ensuring that the funds are kosher, but you have to comply with trade regulation. That adds a different and additional layer of scrutiny. So at that stage, the provider, which will then be a bank or another platform provider, whether it is a fintech one, has to ensure that all that you tick all the boxes as have been defined by the regulation in your country and the other country that you are transacting with on a cross-border basis. So those are the concerns that people have.
Indeed. In your 30 years, I'm sure you've seen these concerns be met with attendant, solutions. And this has caused an evolution from where it was 30 years ago to where it is now, from where it was tangibly exchange of monies or through the banks to apps and APIs and apparatus being used to make this happen. So in your experience, have you noted the pain points that individuals actually go through that has caused this evolution for businesses and for individuals? What were these pain points?
Well, yes, and you're quite right. There has been a lot of innovation. There has been a lot of evolution. We've moved from physical transfer of documents, physical exchange of, if we go all the way back, it used to be physical exchange of keys, where, I don't know if you've ever heard of 3-lock boxes. And that's how, chests were transported over the sea in those days. So physical letters of credit that were actually exchanged to now electronic letters of credit and all of that. And now the latest innovations, like things like blockchain and all that. And what are they trying to achieve? Efficiency and speed. Because as I outlined earlier, there's numerous regulations that you must comply with. There are all sorts of things. Now, each of those, when you think about compliance with money laundering and illicit financing rules, that requires scrutiny. When you think of complying with regulation, it requires scrutiny. And all those add steps and processes, right, that add time delay into these transactions. So innovation today is looking at ways to make it way more efficient. If we speak about Nigeria today and we look at cross-border trade, or when you look at the documentation required, Nigeria has robust exchange control regulation. For example, we have what's called the Foreign Exchange Manual, which is a thick book about that big, that has details everything you can and cannot do and all the forms you need to fill. Now, a couple of years ago, the central bank tried to move the whole process digitally. The starting point of any trade transaction in Nigeria, cross-border trade transaction in Nigeria, is a Form M. If it's an item of physical import, used to be a document which came in when I started banking. I think it was in quadruplicate, right, and all that. Today, it's electronic. So you can go on, input your data. One bit goes for the customs. They do their own exchange control checks and blah, 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 before it's approved, and you start that process. So a big leap forward, but still not where we want to be, right? So what we're seeing now, and we're seeing more of this in the developed world, where you have less exchange controls. We're seeing a move towards conducting these transactions via blockchain. So it's not only secure, but it is very efficient. And if you step back a bit, historically, cross-border transactions have been the purview of banks. And the reason why they were the purview of banks, because you have party A in one country, party B in another country. They don't know each other.
No.
Right? So banks stepped in as intermediaries because at least you trust the bank.
Yeah.
So if I'm party A and I want to deal cross-border, I go to my bank. My bank doesn't know my supplier, who's party B, an individual, another corporate over there.
His bank,
but he may know, my bank will know, or may know his bank.
Yeah.
And if my bank doesn't know his bank, what we can do, because banks have ways, we can send a secure message to them and confirm I am speaking to that bank, his bank. So banks have traditionally been those intermediaries, and that's what has underpinned all cross-border transactions. But again, you have layers, because sometimes, depending on the country I'm trying to deal with, my bank may not have a direct relationship with a bank in that country. So I have to go from my bank to an intermediary bank to another intermediary bank before I get to the suppliers or the party B's bank. All that adds layers.
Can you define what you meant by blockchain and how that is a very important tool in this arrangement? We talked about API on another edition. So how does blockchain actually help with security and KYC and all of what we've just spoken about?
Blockchain technology is threatening to provide an alternative route to underpin cross-border transactions and cross-border trade. And the reason being, because blockchain allows for secure peer-to-peer connection, right? And creating secure modes of executing defined contracts between parties. So basically, what we're saying, using blockchain technology, what some of the providers are able to do now is connect party A directly with party B, obviating the need to rely on the traditional mode, which relied on the banks providing that security. So effectively, it makes it more efficient. So if you think back to what I was saying earlier, where I said, if the bank doesn't have a direct relationship, we have to start using other intermediary banks, which adds costs and time. With blockchain underpinning cross-border transactions, trade transactions, you just go direct. And each connection is secure, each connection is unique, so it potentially provides an alternative route. Now, it's still early days, but there are, and that's why I said earlier, we're seeing that more in the more developed financial markets, where the potential to use blockchain to underwrite cross-border trade transactions is emerging and is real. There are challenges around regulation, the exchange control regulations I talked about earlier and all that, and those are things that will still need to be worked through. But it's potentially something that could be quite interesting.
I'm still quite worried about the security because now you've eliminated the banks and now I'm dealing with another party. Am I sure that this apparatus has taken care of all the necessary details when it comes to security, the KYC, the customer himself? If I eliminate the banks, does this apparatus still keep that security around these transactions? Blockchain now specifically.
Well, these are some of the concerns by the global regulators. And again, I guess all change is difficult, right? So the global financial system has for years been, anchored around banks and the role of banks, and regulation on regulators have enacted strong regulation to ensure that banks, do the right thing. Now, with the emergence of blockchain and other types of technology, regulation has not caught up yet. In fact, the argument is for blockchain and things like cryptocurrencies, there should be sans regulation. But if they're going to be a big part of the global financial architecture, I don't think that can happen. So I guess regulators are looking at it, and there has to be a way for the providers and platforms offering these services to assuage the fears of the global regulators, because the risks around security, AML, illicit financing, fraud are real, right? And we have to find ways to assuage those concerns. So like I said, it's still very early days, and I think that's the biggest inhibitor to it probably have taken off a lot faster until we deal with that. That alongside also dealing with fiscal issues, which are exchange controls and import controls, depending on the various countries in which we operate.
So you talked about regulation, you talked about the architecture itself. Different countries will have their different policies that will instruct your different regulations. Now, how do these partnerships or transactions attend to these varying degrees of regulation? Some focus more on certain issues while others may just flag that off. How does this work in this grand scheme of architecture involving different countries, different banks, different parties?
Well, you see, the way you should look at the technology is proven, right? It connects A to B, right? That's a given.
But dealing with the regulation now of the different countries.
Yes. The regulation will be there. That's an overlay, right? And I don't see it any different from where we sit today in using traditional banking tools, right? What will have to happen at point of initiation, right? We will have to navigate that. So the provider, right, would still have to comply domestically at that point of initiation. Again, I said at point of termination, right, the provider will still have to find a way to comply with the regulations in the terminating country, right? So that's the challenge, and it will not go away. What is proven is that people are nimble enough to try to address that. And we just have to live with that.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to talk about the First Bank Fintech Summit that's coming up very soon. But first off, I wanted to talk about issues regarding innovation, as we're looking forward to cross-border transactions getting better, easier, helping individuals to be able to relate more and transact more with people outside of their countries. What trends or innovations do you think are particular when it comes to this effort? And what do we see this becoming for cross-border transactions in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, look, in my career in banking, I've gone from, seeing a tally number to online real-time
I remember that,
banking.
the tally number one. Yeah, I'm that old.
Check clearing that took 30 days. If you were trying to clear a check drawn on an account, you're trying to clear a check in Lagos drawn on an account in Kano, it took 30 days, 1 month, right? So today we take instant transfers for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, just say, oh, you'll reel off my account number and I go on my first mobile app and boom, 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 boom. And before he's even turned around, I've gotten the money, right? So there's been a lot of innovation in terms of the fusion between telephony banking and financial services and digital and other technology enablers. So in reality, it's about a couple of things. It's about speed, it's about instant gratification, it's about customer experience, right? And those are the key trends that are emerging and driving innovation in financial services. So at First Bank, we've tried to lead that effort. Today, we're probably the largest or have the largest digitally enabled customer base in terms of what we have on our platforms. We've seen the advent of cards. We're the largest card issuer in Nigeria, second largest card issuer in sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we take it for granted. Everyone's got a card, uses POSs, and all those things. We have today First Global Transfer, which allows people anywhere to remit funds directly into Nigeria by going onto the app and doing so. And those tick the boxes that I think will be the key levers for innovation and cross-border transactions. You're looking at speed, instant gratification. I do it now, I get it now. Obviously, you want a bit of security, so which is you've got the platform with all the necessary controls, right? You want also to be sure that you can terminate what is directly to the party you're sending to. So what is directly to his account or to his wallet, as the case may be. So for me, that's what I see. And I think partnerships will be key to achieving that. At First Bank, we work with a wide variety of fintechs that help us, that work with us in delivering, such solutions. We're quick to realize we can't do everything on our own, right? And I think the emerging model will be one of partnerships. I don't necessarily believe that fintechs, everyone talks about challenger banks, neobanks, fintechs. I don't. Fintechs have their strengths, and it's speed, agility, their ability to innovate.
They're not replacements for the bank.
I don't believe they're replacement for banks. Banks have their strengths, which are security. They have the customers. They also understand how to navigate relationships, and they can deal with all the other concerns I highlighted earlier that regulators have around the financial system architecture. And we must understand that banks have been the bedrock of global financial system architecture for hundreds of years, right? So it's one where I clearly see partnerships will be the key for the future.
Grand. To what you've just mentioned, let's now talk about the summit, which is coming up on the 14th, the Fintech Summit put together by First Bank. With everything that we've discussed here and everything that we discussed on Fintech Podcast, what should we be looking forward to at the summit? The innovations, the people who should be at the summit, the people we're looking forward to meeting or hearing from at the summit?
I think we should approach the summit with an open mind. I mean, we want to see the latest innovations, the latest ideas. One of the things we must acknowledge, from the fintechs and not just fintechs, but the fintech community in Nigeria, they are extremely innovative. What they have done and what we expect them still to do is beyond imagination, and they have been integral parts in the journey that we've seen in the progress that's been made in the Nigerian banking sector and the financial system in Nigeria. In many ways, for our payments infrastructure, our payment systems in Nigeria are more advanced than some of the payment systems that exist in Western financial markets. So our expectation is we'll see fresh ideas, new thinking, new approaches to dealing with problems and pain points that customers and everybody who's involved in the financial services ecosystem experience. Hopefully, we'll identify a few new possibilities that we can work with, and that we can help these bright young Nigerians and fintech businesses, help them scale.
Do you think this puts First Bank way ahead of other banks?
Well, again, like I've said,
combing through innovation and selecting the juiciest ones and
well, we like to
apply.
believe that we are a dependable partner for all the fintechs. As I've mentioned before, because of our size, our scale, our digital footprint in the Nigerian and indeed African financial ecosystem, fintechs naturally gravitate towards us. They want to work with us. So yes, we do believe that being open to them, by being willing to partner with them, it gives us an edge. And we've seen that in the scale of our activity on what we do as a major player in Nigeria and Africa.
Well, Mr. Ebong, with over 30 years of experience, putting it all together inside of one podcast is almost impossible. But I must say that I have learned quite a lot, more than what I did from before. And I'm sure that the viewers also have learned plenty. And we're looking forward to the summit. I would like to see what's to come. What in the future would be mind-blowing, because I'm sure that that's in the offing. Mr. Ebong, thank you once again for joining us on the Fintech podcast here, brought to you by our First Bank.
Thank you, Mazino, and I really did enjoy being here. And I just wish all our listeners and everyone I'll just advise them to go open a First Bank account. We are here for you.
Still the marketer. Well, Mr. Ebong, I want to say thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to the viewers who actually joined us to talk about this very interesting topic here, cross-border transactions. I've learned so much. I mean, after 30 years and him bringing this experience here for this podcast, well, 30 minutes is not enough to actually put all of that in, but plenty learned. And I'm looking forward to actually even still learning more, which would be at the Fintech Summits that's coming up on the 14th. So I'm also hoping that everybody's looking forward to that one as well, where we get to see innovations that could help, well, even on the topic here, cross-border transactions, as well as all the other topics or subjects that we could have under finance. Thank you very much once again, Mr. Enian. Thank you to the viewers. We hope to see you next time when we do this again, the FinTech podcast brought to you by First Bank. Goodbye for now.